Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
My name is Julie, and I'm an alcoholic. I am indeed very impressed with all our American sisters that are here. God love each and every one of you. I was kind of unhappy. I was kind of unhappy when nobody stood up from North Dakota. My granddaughter is married to an American airman there, and she should have been here. Maybe she will in another 20 years. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about her. I'm here to talk about me. In this program, it tells us we are supposed to tell you what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. Well, I'll tell you, I didn't like what I used to be like, but it's like it says, you know, I did not start out being an alcoholic. I've already said this when I was going to school. That was not one of the course choice selections, that I would be a drunk. And if I would have told that to the sisters, I think they all would have fainted. But the thing is, I was the daughter of an Indian chief. I grew up in a small little remote village in northern Manitoba. My father was a very powerful man. I admired him. I used to say that to the sisters. I want to be an Indian chief just like my dad. And you know, they always said, shh, little girls do not become Indian chiefs. Well, I have news for them. There's many Indian woman chiefs. Thank you. I appreciate that. But at that time, it was not that popular. But anyway, both of my parents were Native people. I'm very happy to say in 1973, January the 19th, when my mother died, she would have been married to my father 3 weeks short of 50 years. And I was the baby in that blessed union. We are Catholics. And I used to always say that, and I'll say it again. There's nothing worse than a drunken Roman Catholic. Especially someone that had come out of a convent. Because that's how the education system was in my time. They took us from our parents, and I sang and I prayed for my education. I was 5 years old when I went to this boarding school, and I was there for 12 years. And like I said, I sang and I prayed for my education. And then later on, I absolutely turned against organized religion. And when I came in the doors of AA and I heard the word God, I pretty near again went running out the door. I was so fearful. But you know, this is not the way it turned out in the end. I drank for a period of 20 years. I was not an everyday drunk. I was one of those type of drunks that was periodic, and I think we are the worst kind, because there was times it was extremely difficult, even for myself, to accept who I really was. I was so schizophrenic. 1 minute I'd be so, you know, nicey. I'd almost be like Mother Teresa. Then the next minute I'd be out rolling around with the drunks. And you'll find out later on I was rolling around with the drunks right here in the Vancouver Skid Row. And that was a very long way from the village where I came from. The town that I am living now in Dauphin, Manitoba, my Indian village is only 68 miles from there, and I go home quite often. And you know, it's weird because it makes me laugh, as a matter of fact. I go home and the people still remember. One day I went to a gas pump to get some gas with a friend of mine in my village. And this man said to my partner, "What are you doing with the princess?" And you know, this was something I hated when I was a kid in school. The children used to tease me because I was so bad. Even when I was in school, everything that happened that was wrong, the kids used to blame me, and I would always get it. And the sisters would say, "Why can't you be nice like your sister?" Little did I realize that would be a real condemnation for me for the rest of my life, because I was forever being told, "Why don't you be nice?" I'd be so drunk and people would still be telling me, "Why don't you be nice?" You know? Have you ever seen a nice drunk? I'd like to meet one someday. But this is the way it went. Little did I realize that I had a sickness. Little did I realize that alcoholism was really a disease. You know, now the Canadian and the American Medical Association have accepted that. It's not just a theory anymore. Alcoholism is an illness. But you know, a lot of people still poo-poo that idea. I knew it for a very long time that I was sick. There was something very abnormal right from the time I was a child. I was a baby in the family. My father absolutely doted on me, and he absolutely spoilt me rotten. And later on in life, that's what I looked for, a man like my father, aggressive, very dominant, very outspoken, and, you know, a very good dancer, by the way. And I don't mean powwows. And, you know, all my life, this is the kind of a man I looked for. When I was drunk and dating, that's what I'd always say to whoever it was. "Can you dance?" You know, and they'd look at me and they'd say, "What the hell do you want to dance for? Just shut up and have a drink." And then later on, when I first came into AA and they asked me to come to my first conference, I said, "What do the people do there?" I said, and they said, "Well, we'll have a banquet, we'll have a speaker, and then we'll have a dance." I said, "I'm not going. I don't dance." And, you know, the man that saved me said, "What kind of alcoholic are you? You don't dance." But you see, this was a thing. There was always denial in me. One thing, though, that I am very happy to say, I never once denied my Indianness. I am very happy to say this. Even when, in my worst drunken days, you know, and people would go like that to me, like they were making like a powwow or a warrior, and I'd say, "Yeah, go right ahead and I'll show you how to really do the dance," you know. But you see, I still felt within me that I was totally inadequate as a human being. And I even blamed that part. I thought even because I came from this little village and we were so poverty-stricken, I thought my poverty-strickenness had something to do with my alcoholism. I used to say that if we weren't so bloody poor, I might not been such a drunk. But that has nothing to do with it. Environment. I could have been born in Buckingham Palace. And if I was to be a drunk, I'd have ended up a drunk. And maybe a few of them there need our literature too. Anyhow, I dearly loved my mother and my father. I dearly loved the system I grew up in. I even today will say this. I have talked to many of those priests and sisters, by the way, from that order that raised me, since I am sober. And you know, I have said that those were the best years of my life. Those were really the years that I felt secure, I felt loved, and I felt that I belonged. It was easy for me to feel that way. All of my classmates were Indian girls and boys like me. And not only that, nobody wore velvet dresses. We were all dressed alike. Black stockings, navy blue tunics, and powder blue blouses. And I had a little chapeau, and I looked like a little bishop. And so I didn't know any class distinction. So I felt very secure. I never knew what a velvet dress looked like, and it didn't matter. I never had a doll, and that didn't matter, because nobody else had a doll. But you see, the thing is, it still did something to me, and I still say this. We are not born with our attitudes. We learn them as a direct result of our environment. I also learned many things there that I totally didn't believe. I think at a very early age, I was a rebel. Inwardly, I rebelled. I didn't openly criticize or discuss any of my objections to the sisters, but if there was anything wrong, and at that time, if we'd have been allowed to protest, I'd have been the leader, because I would have known how to organize those kids. And they always listened to me. I always had my own little group of friends, and I'd say, don't do that. And somehow they wouldn't. I remember we went for a walk one day, up the road, and we stopped by the storekeepers. And the storekeepers, of course, were Catholics. And they came out, the woman came out, and she started with a great big box of peanuts and was throwing them at us. And I said to my little friends, don't pick them up. We're not dogs. We're not grabbing those bloody peanuts. Of course, none of the kids picked them up, my little gang. And the sisters looked, and then she called me, and she said, you're the one that started this, aren't you? I said, I started what? She said, you'll never go for a walk again. But you see, the kids wouldn't blame me. And that's exactly the way I did all of my life. I would silently rebel. I would silently deny what I was supposed to do. And I became very destructive inwardly. I did not openly do what I didn't want to do, but I still somehow, and I see this even today in the young people. They can talk without opening their mouths and moving their lips. And somebody else can identify with that. And I see it even when I first came into AA. That's exactly what I did. I just, I came here in 1964 and I did absolutely nothing except go back out and get drunk because I didn't come here with an open mind. I had a very long drinking career. I ran away from my village when I was quite young, and I ran to my nearest town, the town I now live in, and I knew somehow there was something about me. But my father didn't even try to bring me back. I guess he thought, let her go. That's what she wants, let her go. And I no sooner arrived at this town where I was at, it was a railroad center, and I met a very nice man. The man that I married was an Irishman and an engineer. And I just thought, oh, whoopee, now I got this guy, I married him for the wrong reasons too. But I thought, good, now, I'll just have everything handed to me. I'll have a very good life and I won't have to work. Little did I realize that was just the beginning of my life of, horrors where I would really have to work. Because this man drank as well as I did, and I learned to drink, and I liked it. I liked what booze did for me. And I also ran into a crowd of people that liked exactly the same things as me. And I also enjoyed the parties. I enjoyed the men. I enjoyed the dancing. And I enjoyed pretty clothes. And I enjoyed the whole environment of that drinking scene. I thought, gee, this is really living. Now I've arrived home. But little did I realize that from the time I took my first drink, something happened to me. It was like lighting a firecracker. And that's, I know, today, the biochemistry of people like me is not exactly normal. There was something in me that triggered it, and I developed this craving. And I would, like I say, I was not an everyday drunk. But when I drank, I didn't know when to stop. And I didn't know how to draw the line. I developed a very unquenchable thirst. And booze did for me what nothing else did. Suddenly I was an expert at everything. You could bring up any topic, and I was the expert. Had I been still drinking, I would have settled all the wars there is in Somalia. And I would have made sure I'd have changed immigration laws so that they would all come to my country, That's the way I was too, my country. Everything was mine. It makes me laugh, It makes me laugh like when we stood to sing the national anthem. At one time in my rebelliousness, I would never stand up. And I used to say that. When I first came to AA and they said, Julie, stand up while we, hold hands and pray, I'd say, to hell with you, I'm not standing up. I don't even stand up for the Queen. And that's the way I was all of my life. I wasn't very popular with that lousy attitude, But I have learned to change. It has not been easy. Last May I came here to this Vancouver to pick up my 25-year cake. Thank you. I don't tell you that to impress you, but it sure as hell impresses the hell out of me every time. Every time I say it, because I'm the one that couldn't stay sober on my own for 25 minutes. I had to come here and learn a whole new set of values, a whole new set of lifestyle, a whole new set of principles, and I had to learn to change my attitude, and that was not easy. I was very sick with my alcoholism. After I met and married that man, and after I lived a so-called normal life, which was not normal for me at all, I drank, and in my stupid drunkenness, I was bored with this life, this housework, and this never-ending paying the bills, and this never-ending, belonging to the PTA, and belonging to the Catholic Women's Group, and belonging someplace else, and that wasn't for me. So, in my stupid drunk, I met another guy. Yes, now I had a husband and a boyfriend. At the same time. And that's not shocking at all. I see them now, having lived in relationships with not one but two or three before they decide to get married. When I was doing it, they called it shacking up, and it almost sounded like it was dirty and it was a moral issue. And I felt very guilt-ridden over that. But I didn't want to live in the same town as my husband. We were living at that time in Edmonton, so I ran away with my boyfriend. That's how come I landed in Vancouver. And my husband just stayed over there, and he said, go on, take off with him. Because he said, you're not fit anyway for a human being to live with. And I said, what are you saying, you crazy man? Whatever happened to, till death do us part? He said, the hell with that noise. He said, you want to go? You have a boyfriend? Take off. And I said, wait a minute, I'm not ready yet. I stayed there living with him for another 6 weeks. Laying in bed, drinking, and carrying on, talking on the telephone, and he's coming home from work, and he'd say, aren't you gone yet? I said, wait, take it easy. I'm still drinking, don't you know? I'm too sick to put on my clothes. But the day came when he said, out, lady, and I knew he meant it. This guy had an Irish temper, and I knew bloody well if I didn't get the hell out, he'd make sure I got out. So I went. My boyfriend said to me, oh, good, that's nice. He said, after all, I'm a logger, and I can get a good job. He said, I used to work at in the BC woods, and he was, what they call a faller. They call them the king of the forest, these guys. And he was a Frenchman, and he was making very mad love to me, and that totally excited me. And I thought, gee, what more could I want? One has money, and the other one is very good in bed. I think I'll just, stay with this guy. And that's how I landed in Vancouver. Now, I am in Vancouver, getting drunk and carrying on like an idiot. And this guy, little did I realize, that's what attracted me to him, because he loved to drink too. And we had, I tell you, never peace, just love and war. And it was terrible. And I thought, what in the hell did I get myself into now? But there's no way I was going to go back and knock on this other guy's door. But I used to go back and forth. I'd make excuses, because my parents were over there. My dad was quite important. So, There I was at one point in time wheeling and dealing with 3 men. I never ran out of money. How could I? Between my father, my husband, and my boyfriend, I just was going like a, paper hanger. Back and forth, east and west and east. Gee, I got so tired. And I was 38 years old and I was still a little girl. And speaking of a little girl, I had a little girl. I have a daughter. I have one daughter. I'm very proud of my daughter. My daughter is a principal in a school. She's a superintendent of education. I also have 5 grandchildren, and they're almost like my kids because my daughter divorced her husband, who also was a drunk, when the kids were small, and the baby was only 3 years old, and I literally raised this little girl. And most Indian grannies have that. We all have extended families. And that little granddaughter of mine is in the university in Brandon, and she phoned me last night. And nothing turns me on more than when that kid phones and says, "Grandma, are you okay? Because I'm worried about you. Are they treating you good there in Vancouver?" Now, if a man phoned me from over there, I would say, "What the hell do you want?" And there is a man that could have phoned me because I parked my car in his garage. I didn't want to pay car parking at the Winnipeg airport. So I said, "Will you do that kind of a favor for me?" He said, "Sure, for you, anything." He's an AA member too. And so, this is the way it goes. After I first heard about AA in 1964 here in my drunken stupor in Vancouver, at that time I was very, very sick. I landed in the hospital 3 times in a straitjacket by going into the DTs. And those of you that have never had that, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. In those times, in the early 60s, there was no such a thing as halfway houses and therapists and psychiatrists and halfway houses and counselors. No. This crazy woman had to sober up on the street downtown on Cordova Street. And I landed up in the Vancouver General Hospital 3 times in a row. I remember coming out once. I was in a straitjacket. I was laying on a stretcher, strapped to a stretcher, ankles and wrists. And I had gone into an alcoholic seizure for 4 days. And there's where they put me, in the hallway. And I woke up and I thought, no, what the hell am I doing? And I was almost scared to turn either that way or that way. I felt like I was trapped onto an ironing board. But it was a stretcher. And that's how they treated drunks in my day. I think this is so inhuman. But what could you do? They would not accept people like us in hospitals. And today I was reading the history of AA, and I was reading about Dr. Bob and Sister Ignatia. And it just brought it all back when I suffered here with the alcoholism. And I still could not see it. I remember my boyfriend coming and getting me from the Vancouver General. And we were walking out of that hospital. And I said, the first thing I said when we got out of there, up here on Heather Street somewhere, I said, "Isn't there a bar here somewhere?" He said, "What? Good grief, woman." He said, "You were in the DTs there going crazy for the last 4 days and you want a drink?" Well, I said, "I'm an alcoholic. I have to have a drink." And that's the way it was with me. Off dead, and I'm still asking for a drink. And that didn't just end there. From 64 to 67, even though I'd heard about AA and I knew there was AA meetings, and I went to AA meetings, I went to the Hillcrest group. I never heard a thing. I sat in the very back room with my mind, absolutely shut tight, and I never heard a word. And do you know that I listened to the worst speakers that I could hear, and I compared myself to them. And I think, good. You know, I was young in them days. I wasn't the way I am now. I said, my goodness, just listen to that. When I get that bad, I'll do something. Imagine how bad is bad. I'd lost my little girl. I lost my home. My husband kicked me out. I was living with my boyfriend. He was all set to give me the boot too. And I was still saying, I'm not that bad. When I get that bad, I'll do something. Well, I kept on drinking for another 3 years. And I never sobered up till May the 15th, 1967. And it was Mother's Day. I'm a Mother's Day baby. There's something very significant about that too. I had failed so hopelessly as a mother. I had failed so hopelessly as a wife. And there it was Mother's Day, and this is my sober date. And at that time I had called the AA office. And there was a dear woman working at the AA office, Lucy. And she was friends of the man that saved me. She was friends of that group I used to go to. I used to go to the Hillcrest group. And this man, she said to me at that time, what do you want this time, Julie? Because she knew I was in AA. They all knew I was slipping and sliding and carrying on like an idiot. And so she said, what would you like, a woman or a man to come and call on you? I said, oh, send a man. I said, send a nice one. You know, I really couldn't relate to women when I first came here. And that's the nicest part about coming here to talk at this first assembly of the International Women's Conference. The first one in Canada, and I was asked to come here. This is just a blessing to me because I hated women when I first came here. And I couldn't relate to women. And I didn't like women. And when Stan called on me that time, he said, do you think you're one of us? I said, well, I better be one of somebody, because I never fitted in anywhere, and that's for sure. I don't think I'll fit in over there too, but by this time I wasn't so brave and I wasn't so mouthy. And so I said, I'll go back to Hillcrest, and I'll do whatever I'm supposed to do there. And you know, he stood and he told me his story. And the one thing that stuck with me, I weighed maybe like this, 240 pounds. My teeth were in the bottom of the toilet bowl, you know. And he said, why don't you have a bath? And you know, my water tank was busted. I couldn't even do that. So I said, well, I will after you leave. But you know, that was the sad part. I really wanted what this man had. And he told me in his own way, he said, I grew up near an Indian reserve. Over there, he said, in Squamish. And I went to a private boys' school too. He said, just like you did, you went to that school. And he said, I used to be married before too. This man is dead now. He has died. He's been dead for quite a while. But at that time, he was working in West Vancouver at Park Royal at Woodward's store. And now I understand Woodwards are not even here anymore in this province. But he was a very nice man. I was very impressed with his appearance. There is such a thing as a 12-step call, where we clean up our act and we go and we call on these people. He had a 3-piece suit on with this beautiful alligator grain Oxfords. And I looked at that and I thought, my goodness, I haven't seen anybody dressed like this in a hell of a long time. Where I'm carrying on with these crazy little drunks, you know, in the Skid Row area, they weren't dressed like that. So anyway, I thought if AA could have done this for you, then I better get my act together too. And he said, I lost my wife. I have another wife and I have 2 children. He told me all about himself. And he said, someday I'll take you home to our house and you can come for dinner. And I thought, I'm not going any place with you. I'm going to AA and that's all. And he said, if you want, I'll pick you up. I'll take you to the AA meetings. I said, don't bother. I know where the Hillcrest group is. I'll walk. Meanwhile, I had running shoes with holes in them and no shoelaces. I didn't even have a jacket. I was wearing my boyfriend Ad Lager's jacket. And you know, I was really down to nothing. But I was still too proud to ask for help. When he offered me a ride, I said, nothing doing. I'm going to walk over there. And that's what I did. And you know, I started off very slowly like that. He said, we do it like that, one day at a time. And I said, that's the way I'm drinking, one day at a time, you know. But anyway, I guess he knew I was so sick. But this man had a real keen sense of humor. He used to tell me funny stories, and I got to laughing. But I was the saddest looking specimen when I first came here. And I was very afraid of what would happen here. And he said one wrong thing before he went out the door. He said, you know, there's an Indian group on the North Shore. And I can't remember what he called it. And he said, would you like to go there? I said, listen, you, the Indian... I said, you guys did, you white guys. With all your gallons of wine. I said, you know, I'm not going to the Indians like this. Besides, I said, they wouldn't want me on a silver platter now. Wait, I said, till I'm sober a few little 24 hours. Then I'll go home and I'll sober up all the people in my province first. I said, then I'll work my way this way. And he started to laugh, you know. He said, whatever you want to do, Julie, is fine with me. And so that's the time, like I said, I used to go to the meetings and I never talked to anybody. I never wanted even to shake hands. I just sat with my head down and I listened. Then one day I asked one woman, I said, do you think when you're the chair tonight, you could ask me to read chapter 5 and how it works? She said, sure, why not? You know, that's how I started. Then one day they found out I could speak, and my goodness, when I started to speak, I couldn't stop. I had so much to tell them, you know, about me. Not about anybody else, but about me. And that's what they said. We share our experiences, our strengths, and our hopes. And you know, I was here for quite a while. I even went back to school. After 26 years being out of school, I went back to the Vancouver City College, paid my own way there. Nobody gave me a bursary. I don't think I would have taken it anyway. I was too bloody proud and stubborn. And you know, I started from there rebuilding my life again after being gone so far down and ending up on Skid Row. And going into the DTs and losing everything. I think what I really, really felt most affected by was losing my self-respect as a human being, as a woman. I had really felt I had dehumanized myself with all of that booze. I was absolutely saturated. I had lost every degree of, you know, dignity as a woman, and I also didn't even want to accept the fact that I was in a hopeless state of mind and body. I could not accept that. Too proud and too, you know, stubborn. But I later on accepted that. Later on, when I, you know, began to search within me, and I saw that somehow I had to become willing to be teachable. I think that's the key word here. But something had happened to me anyway. Something very special about that Mother's Day thing. I was living in a very small, cockroach-infested little apartment on Fraser and 29th Street. And that morning I was running around and I didn't puking, you know, like before Stan came and called on me. And I had never prayed and I had never gone back to church. I could not make myself do this because, number one, I had been excommunicated from my church. As a Catholic, I had no business to marry my first Irishman husband. He was a divorcee. But I married him anyway, because nobody was going to tell me what to do. And that was my number one mistake. So I knew I couldn't go back. And I had never prayed. Even if I prayed, it was not the kind of prayers that anybody would listen to. They were all bargaining prayers. If you do this for me, dear Heavenly Father, I promise I won't do this again. That's bargaining. And that's also putting myself on the same intelligentsia of this God, And, who is going to listen to that kind of a prayer when you're wheeling and dealing? And anyway, at that time when I was so afraid again I was going to go into the DTs, and I would go crazy for sure, because I don't know how many times the doctors warned me, you do this once more and we may not pull you through. And I was throwing up there in front of my porcelain altar, I always like to call it, which was the toilet bowl. And I said that at that time. I had a little bit of a moment of sanity, and I said that. If there is such a thing as God, whoever you are, and this is supposed to be my cup of tea in life, this horrible shit life I'm leading with this stupid drunkenness, I don't want it anymore. Have it. I don't want it. That's it. And I just sat there and I was so despondent. And this is when this thing happened in my life. I heard a voice. I was all alone in that apartment, but I heard a voice, and this voice said, "You have had your last drink." My dear friends, from that day to this minute, I have never had to reach for a drink. The compulsion, the physical compulsion, was removed from me. I told that to that man that called on me, and he told me, "Don't tell them that for the first little while." He said, "They'll think you were going into the DTs again. They won't believe you," he said, Well, I said, I don't care whether they believe me or not. This really happened. And I said, I know that other things were revealed to me during that moment. And I said, other things are going to happen. And he said, "Gee, when you talk like that, you almost seem like you're going to rise above," he said, And I said, "Don't make fun of me, I'm telling you the truth." But it took me quite a while, even myself, to come to grips with that. But I know I've had a perfect healing, because from that day to this day, I have never had the urge to drink again. Never. Not even to have a pill, and I was quite a pill artist at one point in time too. I had a dual problem, and the thing that I developed that through was because in one of the times that I went to the hospital, a psychiatrist came to see me. You see, I had a nurse friend from my town, Dauphin, Manitoba. That was one of the big wheels at the Vancouver General. And I asked her to come and see me during the time that I was there, still demanding, and she did come to see me. And she said, "What do you want, Julie?" I said, "Arrange for me to go to the psych ward." I said, "You can do it, you're a supervisor here." I wanted to admit to being crazy rather than to admit that I was an alcoholic. And it was on this ward that a psychiatrist put me on pills. And that's the worst thing they could have done, because I was popping those Valiums and Antabuse and phenobarbital and you name all those other fancy little pills they were issuing at that time. And between that pilling and that drinking, I was a real zombie. That's why it was so hard for me to get well. And I had tried AA, and I didn't do anything. From 64 to 67, hospitals, doctors, pills, AA. No wonder I had that intervention. Somebody must have been praying very hard for me to have had that blessing. And if you would have looked at me then and looked for the Indian women, there was none here. And even if there was, I was the one most likely not to succeed. I was not worthy of this kind of a gift, this blessing, this grace that I got. But from that day to this, I started rebuilding. I stayed here for a while. Like I said, I went back to school. And then I went back home to the prairies. I felt I owed a real debt over there to my parents. I was the only child, and my parents were getting old. I wanted to look after them in their old age, give them some peace. And my 5-year cake I took in my Indian village. And people looked at me at that time and they said, she was such a drunk. Look at her now. You'd think that was Mother Teresa coming to our village. They were mad and jealous, And I thought, you guys can look all you want. You'll find out you're going to end up joining me too. Because my worst critics were the biggest drunks. They needed what I had. But anyway, I started from there. And I think long before I got here, I had taken the first half of the first step. I knew for a very long time I was totally powerless over alcohol. I also knew that I had a totally unmanageable life. And it never once occurred to me that the two parts of that first step were synonymous. Never. I honestly thought I was the smartest woman that ever came out of my village. And I was going to show you people a thing or two. And I ended up a total failure. Failure as a mother, failure as a wife, failure as a human being. And I also think that that second step, I hated that word when I first saw it, sanity. Insanity. I thought, I'm not crazy. Everybody else is crazy. It's not me. It's the whole world that's out of step. But I actually, I think I did an act of faith when I saw Stan and he called on me. And I was so impressed with his appearance. Through him, I began to believe. Through his power of example. That's why I say it's very important to clean up our act, to put on a few nice things, and to go and appear in the doorways of these people. That's how it came to me. I thought, if AA did this for you, Mr. Man, I want what you have. And through his example, I came to believe that a power greater than myself could actually restore me to sanity. I didn't like that word, but the opposite of insanity is sanity. And I wanted that. I wanted total freedom. I wanted to be able to function again as a normal human being. I knew I had gotten to that crossroad where I was in a hopeless state of mind and body. I did not want that anymore. I also know that, and I accepted this a long time ago, that it was no longer my life, it was no longer my will. After that thing happened to me, that time when I heard that voice, I knew I had to make a commitment. I knew that never again could I run my life in the riotous way that I had been running it, total destruction. I had to come to that crossroad where I could say, Thy will be done, and not mine, because my will was totally destructive. And that was an act on my part of a total commitment. I had learned to make a decision that I was going to live like this for the rest of my life, no matter how long I had. And many things have happened that has proven to me through the years of my sobriety that I should have been dead long ago. I had a very long working career for the federal government. I worked for 18 years in a supervisory capacity. I enjoyed my work. I could have kept on working, but I'd had a heart attack. And so the day that I turned 60 in 1989, that's when I quit working. I pulled a pin and I thought, the hell with this working, let the young people work now. So now I have 3 lovely pensions and I'm still waiting for my old age and I don't need to work. And you know, at one time, I thought I needed 3 men to keep me alive. But that's one of the promises. Fear of economic insecurity will leave us. I earned that too, and I didn't really think that it would ever occur in my life. But it did. I don't need a man to support me. I own my own home. I drive my own car. I've had 5 new cars. And sometimes I lend my car to my granddaughter, and I say, don't hurt it now, dear. It's a $20,000 car. She said, Grandma, is it paid for? I said, yeah. She said, good, I'll hurt it. But you see, this is the way great and wonderful things happen here. If you get the spiritual first, then all these material things will be added. It was not easy for me to look at myself in its entirety at that 4th step, in that 4th step, to admit to you people all my character defects. I am one of the most publicized sinners in my area because I'm talking all the time like this. Many people tell me I don't have to do the 4th step. I said, are you kidding? You got to do it. It says that in the book. We put these things down in black and white. How are you going to put these things down in black and white unless you write it down? And the same thing with the 5th step. Admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. I never used to want to admit the exact nature of my wrongs at one point in time. I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. I thought the whole world was crazy. You know? And all of these steps play a very important part in my life today. I don't know how much time I have here, but I don't want to go through all the steps with you. But I will point out the key steps for me is that 3rd step. And also the 11th step, where we seek through prayer and meditation to improve our conscience contact with God, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Out of all the makeup of these steps, there's only 200 words in the whole composite. This step has the longest wording, has 32 words in it. It's the longest wording, I think, for a very specific reason. You know, I prayed many times, but I prayed for all the wrong things. And I prayed exclusively for my own pleasures. If you do this for me, Mr. God, I'll do this for you. It never occurred to me that my life was given to me, not to just play around and do what I want foolishly. We are all born for a reason. Life itself is a gift. I think right from day one, my alcoholism, my being a drunk was a gift. Because I landed in AA and I found a God of my understanding, and I choose to call Him God. And you know, it's a God that I never would have found had I stayed in the Catholic Church another 100 years. And even if they'd have made me the Pope, I still would not have the kind of conscience contact that I have today. Thank you. I'm very important in my church, by the way. I was actually appointed as one of the elders. A priest came there, built us a beautiful round church, and I belong on the parish council. And I am also a reader in the church, in the Catholic Church. You should see them. Oh, they sit there so quietly when I'm reading. And after, I think, boy, if they only saw me when I was drinking, they'd have heaved me right out the door, But these are the things that happen. I also belong on the hospital board. It's all men on that board. And I'm so proud when they say, what do you think, Mrs. May? I say, well, I disagree with this and I disagree with that. And I say, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, can you please explain your deficit this year? Boy, they hate that, Men, they hate to be accountable. But I like it. I play my role to the hilt. After all, it's a volunteer basis. They can't fire me, you know. And the sisters appointed me. They ran that hospital for 50 years, and there was such a shortage of them, and they wanted somebody that believed like they believed. And so I was self-appointed. And I said, good, I'll come there and I'll do that job. Watch me. And I just love it. And I do many other things. I'm an interpreter in the courts because I speak my native language very fluently. And I speak the Queen's language rather fluently too, you know. But many, many beautiful things have happened to me. I remember after my retirement in the government, they made a farewell party for me, the employees, our employees. And they collected quite a bit of money, and they said, Julie, what would you like to have? We have all kinds of money, maybe like $340 we collected. And they gave me a dinner in one of the nice hotels. It was $25 a plate for the luncheon. And they said, what do you want with this money? Let's buy you a VCR. And you can watch movies, they said. I said, nothing doing. I'm not a dirty old lady to watch dirty old movies. I said, I want a VCR. You think I'm going to sit in front of my TV and knit just because I'm going to retire? Forget it. They said, well, what do you want? I said, buy me a doll. A Royal Dalton doll. Remember I told you I never had a doll in my life? I was born in 1929. How was I supposed to have a doll, you know? And that's what they bought me. And when I told that to one of the other supervisors, a director, a man director, he said, Julie, how could you have gone through all of your childhood without ever having a doll? I said, shut up, you. Don't you remember I was born on an Indian reserve where we didn't even have waterworks, and we didn't have wall-to-wall carpets, and we didn't have electricity? I said, it was not until the 50s that I think we finally got electricity. I said, that's the kind of background I came from. I came from very humble beginnings. And it's not a sin to be poor. And you know, I was bound and determined. I was going to fix that. And I worked very hard to be where I am today. I didn't sit on my butt. And you know, I never collected a day of welfare in my entire life. And I don't intend to start now. But you know, I did many things in my life. And when one thing failed, I started again and again. And I'd have been still working if I hadn't had a heart attack. But I'm also a diabetic. And I'm on 2 needles a day. So what you see is what you got. No wonder I'm not looking for a man. They'd marry a very sick old lady, you know. And besides, my kids wouldn't want that. And I didn't come here for that. I came because I wanted to help the other people, mainly the native women and the native girls. And you know, it's a thankless job, this work that we do. I used to be very critical until I started this public speaking for people like us. But I do this because I love it. But when we do this, we are also public target for criticism. And when we do volunteer work, it's the same thing. It's a thankless job. And I have to laugh because one day a priest said to me, don't worry, Julie. He said, someday when we get up there, I don't know where we're going, but he said up there, you know. And he said, there'll be a nice padded chair for you. I said, I don't want a padded chair. I just want my foot in the door. And you know, that's the way I used to feel when I first came to AA and I saw the people and the nice ladies and the people that greeted us at the door. I used to be so impressed. I also know that we have this 12th step where it tells us this. We have to give this thing away. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. In this context, had, H-A-D, is a noun. This is the only time in English history that this noun has become a verb. And a verb is an action word. We do something. And in this case, this is what we do. We have to give this thing away to the still suffering alcoholic in order to keep it. And that's the nicest part. It is so rewarding because to see these people grow. Today on the First Nations panel, and I had these Indian girls, beautiful girls, and one of them I had sponsored. Then she went on to sponsor the other one. I almost feel like the mother and the grandmother to these girls because it's so rewarding for people like me that have had this. And we were able to give it away. It's not always like that. I remember one girl in my community, she just got a year before I left. And she had come to me in the beginning. And early in the morning, she was supposed to go to work, and she came to me and wanted some personal advice, private tutoring, she called it. And I let her have it. Anyway, I didn't know she was mad. She went out of my home mad because I didn't agree with one thing she said. She had it all wrong, and I tried to help her, but I didn't pull any punches. I can get very feisty at times, So anyway, she said it when she got her cake. Oh, she said, and those old-timers, especially her over there, she said, I usually sit right in front of the hall by the chairperson because I can't stand the smoking in the meeting halls. And so she said, I went to see her. She said, oh, she was mad. You could just taste it in her mouth, the bitterness, And she said, I was trying to get some help. And, I thought, that opinionated, self-righteous, old, and I know what she wanted to call me, but she said that. She said, there's no way I ever wanted her for my sponsor. I ever wanted to go. But she said, in spite of all that, I love her today, and I'm sober 1 year, and thanks to her, she said, I never said nothing. I just closed my eyes. There was a man sitting across from me, the radio announcer, and he started winking. He has about 34 years of sobriety. And so, afterwards I went to her, and I hugged and I kissed her, and I congratulated her, and I said, I'm so very happy for you. I said, you have a year. And she said, thank you very much. And she said, I really want to apologize to you. I said, don't bother. I didn't even know you were mad. I said, but I guarantee you, I said, resentment has driven more alcoholics back to the bottle. And some of them end up dying. I'm glad you're here. And I said, please stay with us this time. And I know that she'll stay, but it wasn't easy for her. And I'm sure it wasn't easy for her to say this either. But that's the way it works. We don't get any glory here. It's a thankless job, like I said. And I am going to end with this. It's from the big book, and I want to read it because I don't want to misquote it. I'll have somebody after come and tell me that's not exactly the way it is in the big book, After all, we are all experts here, But this is what it says, and I want to close with that so you'll remember it. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do. For alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of our alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day that we must carry the vision of God's will in all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of our wills. Amen. And I want to thank you for listening. This is the highest compliment and tribute that you can pay to speakers like us. Your undivided attention. I appreciate that, and for that I thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.